Hello. So in this video, we're going to talk about the Three Kings of Cologne. Now, this is a Welsh biblical play, possibly from the latter portion of the 15th century. I'm reading this out of the Broadview Anthology of Medieval Drama. And wow, is it a weird one. And I say that not sort of judgmentally. I think it's actually really, really interesting, really, really cool. But one of the things that's weird about the Three Kings of Cologne is that it does not seem performable. So it's an interesting one because so basically this is a nativity play, right? So it tells the story of the journey of the three magi, or three kings, or three wise men, depending on your particular translation in this version. So this version in the Broadview is translated obviously into English because I don't read Welsh, but it was originally in probably Middle Welsh, I assume. It was originally in Welsh. So this is a Welsh play based on what would at that time have been probably the Catholic Bible, possibly the Douay-Rheims translation into English. I don't know. I don't know what the sources for this Welsh biblical play were. It doesn't matter. My point is that this was translated from the Welsh into English, and the Welsh authors would have used whatever sources they would have used. So it could be kings as such, it could be wise men, could be magi, whatever. It doesn't matter. That's not important, despite the amount of time I've spent on it. So we have the journey of the three kings following the star to get to Bethlehem to honor the baby Jesus. Then we have Herod pursuing them and the slaughter of the innocents. So all of that is covered in a very, very short amount of text. This is just over it's actually about 4 pages exactly of text if you ignore the character list, which takes up a little under half a page in a column. So we have a very, very short space of time in which all of this stuff happens. One of the ways in which this is possible, one of the ways you cram this much material in there, is you have no sort of connective tissue that actually makes this properly performable, right? So normally, if you're thinking about creating a play for performance, and you have a transition between, say, 2 places, 2 times, some amount of time elapses, whatever it is, you normally have some kind of indicator of that, so that actors, directors, and audiences can follow what's going on. Here we don't. Here we just jump immediately from scene to scene very, very rapidly. So I'll give you a couple of examples of this. Lines 17, from line 17 to 20, we have the first king speaking. And then from 21 to 24, we have the second king speaking. Now, the first king says, "The way to Bethlehem is difficult, for we are ignorant of it. To get good advice and direction, let us go to Jerusalem." Fine, good enough. The kings are on their way to Jerusalem to figure out how to get to this town where Jesus is being born. Fair enough. But then, between lines 20 and 21, they've made that whole trip and they've arrived. Because the second king, at line 21, starts by saying, "Porter at the city gates, open the gates to receive your reward. To go to King Herod, his kingdom is marvelous." So literally between lines 20, where the first king says, "Let us go to Jerusalem," and line 21, where the second king says, "Porter at the city gates," they have traveled that whole distance. There is nothing suggesting any sort of action. There is no dialogue during their travels, etc., etc. And this is a very odd thing, right? Because if you were writing this for performance today, you would put in some kind of transition stuff, right? Something would happen. Here it's just a straight out jump, and there's no like stage directions indicating that like here the kings pretend to travel to Jerusalem. It's literally just boom, boom. Another example of this, actually a slightly more strange one in my view. Within a speech by one character, they have this kind of jump. It's not as dramatic a time and space jump, but from lines 45 through 52, the messenger is speaking, and he has two stanzas. In the first stanza, he says, "You are fine kings, come along with me to see King Herod, his ceremony, and his royalty." Second stanza starts, "Here are the kings. There was a sign of wonder. They themselves will tell their business and their story from the ends of the earth." So between lines 47, where the messenger finishes inviting the kings to go along and see Herod, and between lines 48, where he ends doing that, and 49, where he is addressing Herod, they've clearly arrived at Herod's palace. They have entered, they have gone through to the Great Hall or whatever it is, and they have now an audience with Herod. So even within this character's speech, we have this big transition in space and time that just isn't accounted for in the text itself. So one of the things the Broadview editors speculate, they say here, no documentary evidence for the performance of these plays survives, and it seems quite possible that they were intended for a different mode of performance than we would normally understand as drama, perhaps as a group of stationary tableaux vivants in which the individual characters would speak but not move. Now, this would make sense if you figure that each stanza, so a tableau vivant, for those who don't sort of know this term, because it's not really a thing that anyone does anymore. It was once a very popular performance style, but basically a tableau vivant was a group of performers would stage basically a snapshot of a scene, like a single moment. Basically, if you think about something like ancient Greek vase painting, or a William Hogarth tavern woodcut or something like this. Basically, these were performance styles in which people would basically be a living picture. And that's where the term comes from the French tableau, is a term for painting. Vivant refers to being alive. So it was a living painting, essentially. And if you think about each stanza as a different scene, and the character and the actors would reposition themselves for each scene to represent what was going on in that particular quatrain, that particular set of 4 lines, you couldn't perform this. It'd be very, very odd by modern standards. But again, it's a type of performance that once existed, and it could work. You could stage it. Just, again, most audiences today would not really know what to make of it, which, fair enough. That being said, there's some things that are really very standard about this that actually do connect this to other types of medieval drama, things that are not odd at all in this broad category. So, for instance, we start with the messenger calling people to attention. Stop your talking and listen. Let no one make noise on any instrument, or you will certainly get a rebuke. Now you've been warned unless you're quiet. That's a very standard opening for medieval drama. I mean, this idea of like calling an audience to attention is very, very common. Often you get this with sort of either messengers, angels, or sort of villain characters. And here we have a messenger. So, yeah, standard stuff. You definitely can see links between traditions of medieval drama and this text. But the Three Kings of Cologne, again, is a very odd piece because it doesn't have dramatic action the way we would tend to think of dramatic action. Another thing that we get in this play that's very standard medieval stuff is this sort of anachronistic language that's rooted in the Christian experience of the medieval world. So, for instance, at line 63, the second king refers to Jesus has been born, but they wouldn't have known Jesus' name. The name Jesus is not in the Hebrew Bible. It's not in any of the sort of prophets' discussion of the Messiah. It is purely a New Testament thing. A few lines later at 68, or at 67 rather, Herod refers to the Virgin's son. Yeah, there are Hebrew Bible prophecies that suggest a virgin birth, but I don't think it's sort of set in stone in the Hebrew Bible. It's not something that's clearly sort of foreordained. So this would be, again, an anachronistic reference. A little bit later, the second king, line 90, refers to the Blessed Mary. Again, that's an anachronistic reference. It's something that medieval Catholics would know, but the three kings and Herod would not have known. They would not have said that. And then later, there are references to Mahud, which, as we know from other medieval drama, is a term often sort of put into the mouths of non-Christians. It refers to Muhammad, the founding prophet of Islam, who, of course, lived in the 6th century, 7th century? I don't remember off the top of my head. That I'm blanking on that for some reason when Muhammad lived. Anyway, he was not around prior to the 1st century BCE, and so Herod and Herod's messenger, who are the two characters who refer to Mahund, that's a reference they would have. But again, it is a reference that medieval Christians in the post-Crusades period would definitely have understood. Another element that is that's very standard medieval biblical play is actually the incorporation of non-biblical materials. So, for instance, when the messenger is sent by Herod to Bethlehem to find out where the three kings have gone, since they've not returned to Jerusalem, they are met by a porter's servant at the gates of the city. And the porter's servant is basically like, shut up, you're not getting into the city, my master's asleep, go away, or I'll fight you. And so the porter's servant and this messenger have this pointless fight outside the gates of the city. And then the porter basically shows up and he's like, whoa, stop fighting. Here, messenger, I will give you some money if you don't report this to Herod, because I don't want to lose my job. So this incorporation of this sort of working class character who would have been very recognizable to a medieval audience is something we see, for instance, in the Wakefield Master's Second Shepherd's play, where the play itself really has nothing much to do with biblical history, but it is this depiction of these these shepherds who would have been a very familiar type of character, a very familiar person in sort of Western England, northwestern England, where Wakefield is. In this play, because this is from Wales, a lot of Welsh mythology and legends deal with the porters of gates, because gates are obviously a really important traditional symbol of transition, of movement between spaces, etc., etc. And Welsh mythology incorporates a lot of them. And so having that scene built in that has no biblical precedent, it serves no real purpose in the play other than presumably to be comic relief in this very, very short scene, in this very, very short play. Yeah, it's something that would be recognizable to the audience, and it's built in seemingly for that purpose. But then the other thing that I think is really fascinating about this play, the other reason I really like this, The Three Kings of Cologne, is that at the end, Herod, who's usually a sort of unrepentant villain in a lot of medieval drama, Herod becomes a tragic figure. Like we think about the Aristotelian notion of tragedy, right? That a character is flawed in some way, or they make a tragic error out of hubris, out of pride, whatever it is. And then there is the turn, there's the recognition of that error, of creating one's own downfall. That's not necessarily a typical mode for medieval drama, but here at the very end we get it with Herod, right? Because Herod sends out his soldiers. He is enraged that, in typical Herod fashion in biblical drama, he is enraged that the baby Jesus has been born, that he is going to become the king of the Jews and displace Herod as ruler. So he has sent out his soldiers to murder all of the babies in Bethlehem or Judea or whatever it is. The slaughter of the innocents, famous, horrific biblical scene. And then at the end here, Herod says, "Have you no idea which one is the prophesied child? Give him quickly to me from among these, or there will be trouble between us." And here's where we get that revelation. How, I'm not in my senses, that I should kill my dear son while seeking the child of prophecy. The work was not good. I wish so cruelly that a sword were driven through my heart. I deserve an evil fate for doing wrong to the innocent. And so Herod suffers this tragedy. His actions have led to his own loss. He loses his son. His son is among those killed in the slaughter of the innocents, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but okay, whatever. I'm happy to have it because it's an interesting, tragic twist to the character. And he repents. He repents his tragic mistake. And he becomes this tragic character. And then we end with a stanza by the devil. "Haha, I shall play a dance and leap into my coat of mail. I see King Herod made ready in his vengeance." So we end with the devil. The devil made Herod do it. Herod is a tragic figure, and the whole thing is completely unstageable as we think of staging today. It's a weird, fucking delightful little play.